So we'll now go to item 8. Now, item 8, members, is on page 13 of the agenda. You recall that we approved the refreshed City Centre Master Plan in 2020. We're now somewhere along the path of the implementation of that plan, and staff from across the council and the group have looked at a number of options to look at how we get to the pointy end of implementation and the leadership of the placemaking plans that we intend to be putting in place for the city centre to deliver on that master plan. Now, we've got Barry Potter with us, who has been leading this work and the change management there, and Ian Wheeler from Eke Panuku. Just to be clear, this item is not about the budgets or the program in its detail. It's about the structure we're changing or likely to change to implement those budgets and programs. That is a separate conversation. So I will now hand to Barry Potter, Director of Infrastructure and Environment, to introduce the item, supported by Ian Wheeler, Chief Operating Officer at Eke Panuku. We've also got in attendance David Rankin, Chief Executive of Eke Panuku, Andrew Allen from Auckland Transport. You get to get a sense of the integration and collaboration that's gone into this. And Noah Maffett, also, he's from Auckland Unlimited. So welcome, Barry, and I will now hand to you, Barry.
Thank you, Chair Darby, and kia ora tātou. Look, I'll just speak very briefly to the paper. We don't have a presentation. Hopefully it stands pretty much on its own. And then Ian Wheeler will follow up with a few comments after me. Just a little bit of background of this. The last 3 to 4 years, as we're all aware, has seen considerable investment in the implementation of the City Centre Master Plan. And some of those drivers, of course, 2021 was going to be our big year, or the America's Cup, APEC and so on and so forth. It's changed a little bit, of course, but also the City Rail Link. And we're all aware, I think, of those projects, and they have been very successful indeed. And the success of those has really been achieved through the high levels of collaboration between Council, Eke Panuku, Auckland Transport and Auckland Unlimited through the life of those works. Depending on which the project was. And now that we're entering into the next phase of the City Centre Master Plan and moving more into the Midtown area, we felt as a group it's time to reflect and to look at how we're operating, how we might do things a bit differently, and just also to move. The centre's going through a few challenges at the moment, as we're all well aware, with COVID and also the disruption. What we as a group feel is that there are some things that could bring benefits to the way the City Centre Master Plan is delivered. One of those is just having that consistent leadership from the project focus we've had to deliver the works to that program focus. And so that's what we're bringing today for the committee's consideration. We feel that leadership naturally falls under Eke Panuku and their role as their urban renewal role, and it brings these works alongside the program. It's also this brings it into alignment with the recommendations of the CCO review about having one entity providing clear leadership for different programs and works. Now, what we're proposing here doesn't involve any major organisational structural change. There's nothing like that here. Through the teams who are doing those works on that collaborative approach that we've used on all the works to date. But it does bring Eke Panuku in there to provide that overarching leadership on the project. That collaboration will continue between Eke Panuku, Council, Auckland Transport and Auckland Unlimited. Some of the things that we really think this would bring, it would bring works, it would bring a stronger integrated approach and a more place-based approach to the program, and would also build on that trust and confidence in the council group, we believe. So Eke Panuku looking to appoint a program director, and this transition will happen over the next period of ground. Chair Darby, I think that Ian Wheeler might have a couple of comments just about the mechanics of that as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Barry. And over to you, Ian.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. I think Barry's covered a few additional points. We all understand and recognise the critical and important role of the city centre, the role that's played in the past and the role that it will play in the future, both for the Auckland region, but for New Zealand as a whole. It's a really it's an economic heart. It's home to more and more residents. It's got a strong cultural and arts sector. It's a big learning and education sector with the universities, key transport and recreation and tourism, which is a key part of the city centre as well. So it's an essential and critical part of our overall region and country. Obviously, it's faced a number of big challenges. We're well aware of those around the growth of the city, the infrastructure to support that growth. We travel and move through and around the city centre is another key thing, and big changes afoot on that front. And of course, the pandemic and the impact that that's had over the last 2 years. And those things all really reinforce the need for us as a council group to have a clear lead agency and clear leadership around the city centre, and for a really strong, joined up approach based to deal with these challenges and effectively play our role to achieve the aspiration and the vision covered in the City Centre Masterplan 2020. Assuming the endorsement today of the committee, as Barry said, over the next 6 to 9 months, we will implement this change, but working strongly on the principle that we will maintain momentum for the city centre. We'll be looking for a key leadership role as a priority location director or program director for the city centre. In parallel with that, we will just kick off a discovery and establishment phase around exactly what everyone's doing and who is doing that, so we can properly scope up the change next 6 months or so. They will all shape up into strong governance across the council group and how that feeds into our respective boards and organisations, how we make decisions across the group. Obviously establishing a dedicated matrix team from staff, using all our staff and their expertise and a humming dedicated council team that's focused on the city centre and what's best for the city centre. And finally, pulling that all together by the middle of next year and sort of working that out over the balance of that year, what we call a program business case, which will set in place the plan, one plan around how we implement years ahead of us and address the challenges that we've already talked about. So that's really all I wanted to say, Chair, in terms of words of introduction. And I would also just note, and I assume you will cover that, the discussion at the Auckland City Centre Advisory Board recently.
Yes. Now, even job necessarily to report their resolution, but Barry, do you have the resolution in front of you, Barry?
No, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, I don't have it. I wasn't there yesterday that I was unable to make it.
Yeah, it was discussed under extraordinary business and they passed a resolution unanimously in support of this direction. Sandra, do you have the resolution there just to confirm for the...
Yes, I do.
While we're waiting for that,
please, and I'll pop it up for you.
Well, we'll pop it up shortly. Other contributors to this new integrated group led by Ike Panuku are Auckland Transport and Auckland Unlimited. Andrew Allen, if there's anything you'd like to say, you've been part of this journey over the last few months. You would like to say, and then Noah Maffett, please.
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing in particular. I think the other two presenters have covered all of the detail, but I'm really looking forward to being able to lift the bar of the game in terms of delivery of city centre outcomes with the team that's presenting today.
Thank you, Andrew. And Noah, if you're with us, feel free. No, I don't think Noah's managed to join us this morning, but Auckland Unlimited, Auckland Transport, Development Program Office, all of Barry's team and Eke Panuku have been working this up over the last couple of months. So that's how it's got here. That's who's involved, has been involved, and that's who will be involved going forward as well. So are there questions, please, members? Now I just need to go down the list here. I think
it was actually Councillor Walker was before me.
I'll go with you. I've got you now, so I'll go with your question, and then we'll go back to Councillor Walker.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Morena Koto. Very happy to support that. And great to see that heads have been banged together for a solution and a proposal for a lead agency. One of my questions has been answered around the ACAB response, so that's great. The second, well, there's two related partai. One is around centre is their front doorstep in a way, particularly Waiheke. So just would like confirmation around how their views are going to be captured or how they're going to be brought into this kind of collaborative approach with the lead agency. And related to that is a specific issue that has never really been properly addressed, that we can finally nail it, and that is around the accessibility of the whole downtown, the integration of, you've got the new ferry piers, you've got the new bus interchange, you've got CRL opening, but there's been no plan around accessibility between the different modes, getting between the issue for accessibility and accessibility in terms of particularly those with disabilities or just not being able to walk those distances. So I don't think there's been lots of goodwill, confirmation that that's going to be an issue on the list of things that Eke Panuku will take up.
Barry, I might have to pass to you. We are essentially talking about the structure here, the lead agency. And Barry, my understanding is that all the bodies of work that have been agreed to are carried over.
Sure. Two questions there. First one, engagement with local boards. Yes, that's happening. So working through that process. In terms of access to the city centre, Andrew Allen might want to comment on it, but a key part of this program, of course, is access for everyone. And Andrew, whether you want to comment particularly about that, but that access for the city centre and how you move around is a key consideration.
Through the chair, absolutely, Barry. Look, I didn't want to get into a lot of detail, but I think to answer the councillor's question, absolutely, accessibility issues between modes in the downtown area would need to be part of what we look at as a subset of the larger access for everyone piece. But the council family, we need to own that and get on with it. So it's on the agenda, to answer your question, councillor.
Great, thank you. I think we might be talking about accessibility in two different ways, but let's make sure that we don't lose track of that. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you, Councillor. Now, Councillor Walker, please.
Sure, just got a question around process around this issue. And the reason I ask that is the track record to date in parts of the centre city is pretty abysmal. we know there are issues and obviously significant interest. So did you consider having a workshop on this?
Are you asking that of me or our?
I'm asking it of officers. The assumption is
Okay, I'll go to Barry
officers
Potter, please.
reporting on this process.
Sure. In terms of that, this has been, there have been workshops, but through the officers, the key consideration here that officers had was how to pull together better the program. Happened between officers right across the group because the whole group has been involved in the program, the projects to date. So parties involved in those are Auckland Unlimited, Ikapanuku, AT and Council, of course.
Thank you, Barry.
The other question I've got just goes to there isn't a great deal of information in that in the report as to how it would work. Would I be making the assumption under the Auckland Development Office? Is that a fair assumption or what? Because I actually can't read into option 1 because it's almost, well, there isn't much there in terms of any contestable advice. So could you fill me in there, Barry?
Through the chair, yes. Option 1 is that the player lead, but the difference between the two is that that would be a continuation of how it has been run to date. And we look at those entities. AT have led projects. Ikapanuku have led projects or programs such as the Wynyard Quarter. Council has led projects such as Federal Street and Myers Park and Ellen Melville and so on and so forth. It would continue that process where different parts of the group would lead different projects. The intention here is to pull it all together closer under one is Ikapanuku under their urban renewal responsibilities. So that's the difference between the two.
Thanks. I'll reserve my right to speak.
I think you're on mute, Chair.
Fletcher is with the next question. Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you. Mine just sort of perhaps follows on from that. If you were to look, as I've done in the past, at the most logical CCO, it would be Auckland Transport. Can you tell me whether or not you gave consideration? I mean, in terms of accountability, but why not Auckland Transport? Barry, do you want to respond to that, please?
Barry.
Through the chair, yes, Councillor Fletcher. It is what the outcome is we're trying to achieve. If it's through Auckland Transport, then that brings that transport. If we are trying to achieve that placemaking, that more urban renewal, a place for people to gather, then that's naturally the role of Ikapanuku. So it's what is the focus that we want there. Ikapanuku, of course, do urban renewal. They've been very successful in the Wynyard Quarter. That's and using the skills that they have to give it that focus, rather than kind of sure. Ian.
So you've taken the view that it's more about placemaking than transport. Some of us might believe that the prioritisation should be transport by foot, footpaths, and but one of the biggest challenges is getting that connectivity, and my fear is that could get lost in terms of the way you've put forward the recommendations. Do you want to comment further on that?
Maybe I can comment, Councillor Fletcher. Just in terms of Transport will be and play a pivotal role in the city centre, and we work closely with them in a range of different town centres across the region, and that integration between transport and land use is obviously fundamental to the success of our city. So how we travel will be a key part of it. We tend to have, as Barry said, a regeneration approach. That's our approach. We have a place-based approach, so we think about the places we work in as a place, and we think about all the dimensions of that place to make great places for people to live and work and play. So, and components of that, so they all fit in with that. We'll be thinking about the commercial side of it and the property development side. We'll be thinking about the public realm. We'll be thinking about the placemaking activities and our engagement with the community, and through all of that as well, great design, sustainability, local economic development, how we work with Māori and mana whenua. So the place and pull that together. That'll be our kind of lead conductor role.
Thank you for that, Ian. And I don't want to get into debate now because I would like to be able to comment later. But in actual fact, Panuku don't have a lot of property in the downtown, but I mean, all of these things, did you give, before you came to us with these recommendations, did you give any consideration to Auckland Transport at any time as you went through your evaluations? Was that a consideration at all?
No, we didn't. Over the last couple of months. I mean, Andrew might want to comment about that too in terms of what you're asking, but no, we didn't contemplate that specifically recently, no.
Andrew, can I pass to you? You're going to be part of this integrated team. It's going to have Eke Panuku at the lead. It's not exclusively them. There are some mics on there feeding. Of Auckland Transport's view of this integrated unit led by Eke Panuku.
Yeah, look, thank you, Chair. I think to speak to the councillor's question, Ian has kind of laid out the rationale which we all of us who've been workshopping this over the past few months subscribe to. To treat the city as a place as something quite unique to the capability that Eke Panuku hold. But I did want to really emphasise that from a transport perspective, this doesn't, we are wholly wed to being part of the matrix team that Ian has referred to previously, and we bring all of the transport. It's just that we're not leading, and I guess the consideration from our perspective is I don't know that transport should be the lead agency for the development of a city centre as a real place that's inviting and encouraging for people to come to, dwell in, work in, play in. So I feel like this in no way dilutes or undermines of progressing towards the outcomes sought through the city centre master plan. It's just how we believe we need to organise ourselves to give us a better chance of telling the bigger and the whole picture and story.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I think I've got Councillor Hills next. Councillor Hills.
I think Andrew actually just answered my questions around whether everyone was on board with this, and it sounds like they are. I guess my high-level sort of question maybe for Ian is, just as we go forward, you know, we have seen fantastic spaces from Wynyard to Quay Street to Te Wānanga. How do we ensure that from now we've got that collective one voice? And is that what this is, that we have one place of contact, we have the clear vision? Because I know that trying to get issues, say bollards or rubbish or things fixed or seats or something, it's like not really knowing who to go to. Is this what this you're trying to do, is have a streamlined approach where you you'll be the one going to Auckland Transport or Community Facilities about the toilets or something? Is that sort of, you'll be able to spread your wings throughout a project and after the project individually? Is that sort of what your aim is?
Yeah, I think in terms of council group is what we want to do. The success of the city centre will be completely reliant on all of the council group playing its part. We talk about it as a conductor rather than a commander, how we lead that overall, but everyone needs to play their part and play their part effectively, right down to emptying the rubbish bins and keeping the streets clean and dealing with all of those issues. So that's something we will still rely on the council group to be doing, but we'll have a clear lead in place for the strategy and the plan and how we make decisions. The centre.
And I don't know who this is a question for, maybe also you, Ian, but how do you see, will you be sort of taking over the responsibility of kaitiaki for the projects that have been completed, not just the projects going forward, and how they interconnect and are managed from that arise, or is it just looking forward to new projects like the linear park and different things? Or is it sort of, that's where I'm, there's a bit of overlap between looking after, whether it's a dead tree or something that needs to be moved or whatever. Is that the role, or is it just about development going forward?
Establishment phase, we'll look at everything that's happened and what's underway and what's planned, and then work out the best way to shape that up from a governance point of view and how we work and lead that from a group perspective. So sorry, I can't answer the specifics, but we obviously need to understand what's gone before, what's on at the moment, and where we're heading.
And the last question, just how will the mana whenua approach, which has been done so well with Panuku and with Auckland Transport, how does that interface? Do we get the best of all worlds and all information, or will you get the sort of a kaitiaki forum that's already across the CCOs to come in and support from the beginning and throughout? Just how will that be managed so we're not overworking people or not giving people the same voice going forward?
Yeah, again, that's, as I say, something that we'll look at in terms of what we've got currently on the go, what we keep working with, and what we might adjust over the place.
Yep.
So if there's any way to streamline that and make that simpler, but still ensure their effective engagement, then that's what we will be doing.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And another question, I think final question from Councillor Watson, please.
Following up a little bit on this enhanced status quo, that's the additional option 1, which barely has 3 small points attributed to it in this paper. I wonder if you could just help me a little bit understand what's meant by point. We would see an improvement in leadership, additional resource and capability, and achieved a more joined up council approach with minimal operational impact, all of which seem like positives. The qualifier at the end is there are some risks in terms of low buy-in and communication. I'm really struggling to understand how that informal basis couldn't be formalised, and if there's low buy-in and poor communication, how that similarly couldn't be addressed very easily. Getting some formalised approach there and ensuring that everyone's buying into it.
Can I go to you, Barry?
Yes, perhaps if I respond to that. One of the challenges that we've had with the program as that the focus is on the projects. And an example that I could give would be if we look at Quay Street, for example, we had a very strong focus on Quay Street and the ferry terminal and the downtown public space to Wānanga, hugely successful. But immediately adjacent to it is another project, which is the Komititanga, delivered council and so that's the challenge of delivering on a project by project basis. From a public experience, of course, it's that was our construct. It isn't how how you experience it. That's all one experience, and of course that continues there all the way from the waterfront, Quay Street to Wānanga. This the concern over how we've been doing it, even if we enhance it, is it would continue that kind of modular look at how things are delivered, as opposed to a total program and getting that consistency across the whole lot. That's the fundamental difference between the two.
So, judgment on the basis of the two options that are before us today, to what extent was track record in the delivery of other projects, and I guess in terms of the multitude of problems facing the city centre, the ability to I guess draw parties together, not least of which is the public. Did that inform any of this assessment as it appears before us today?
Yes, well, it's been through the chair. Sorry,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Were you going to say something? Key to that has been engagement with ACAB, City Centre Advisory Board, yesterday, and this has received their strong endorsement, as the chair has shared. So that engagement with wider groups has been through that, now goes out through local boards and more broadly, but committee as part of that process. Okay,
final question, Mr. Chair. In the report, you reference the CCO review a number of times. So I'm assuming that your recommendation has been informed by the commentary in that just in a little over a year and a bit ago. So the CCO review has been fundamental in the direction in this item?
Through the chair, yes, it's a key consideration, and it's yep.
Okay, thank you. I reserve my right to speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Are there further questions here, members? If you put your hands up, I don't think there are. Please, Sandra. Thank you to the presenters, Barry, Ian, Andrew, and others that have been doing this work. So look, I'll move accordingly. I think I have a second from Councillor Coombe. Just speaking briefly, so this is a structural change. At the outset, I'd like to just acknowledge the goodwill of everybody involved, along with the chief executives of Auckland Transport and Eke Panuku, Shane Ellison at Auckland Transport and David Rankin at Eke Panuku, and senior executives. Also like to acknowledge the very strong support of the City Centre Advisory Board yesterday. We've been working on this for some time, several months, and it's come to this point. There's no heads have been banged, Councillor Coombe, as you said. This has been very accommodating. And also the Mayor's Office and Mayor Phil has been closely involved with this direction. So look, what we're essentially looking at here is we're strengthening the leadership of projects around the city centre. We're identifying who the go-to champion of the city centre is. Out of this committee, we've actually directions, and it really is about implementation time. And we've got some $500 million in budget over the next 10 years for projects and programs to be implemented in the city centre. So we're choosing that placemaking expertise of Eke Panuku and don't they have it in volumes. We're saying to them, you're at the helm now, but you're doing it. The barriers outlined. It's a collaborative approach, and we now go forward, and they are charged with helming that change management. So the city centre, you know, it's suffered badly with COVID, and but it's in some ways, well, is a major contributor to the national economy. So it's important that we support it by ensuring there is clear and effective council leadership for implementing that $540 million change program that I mentioned. In the past, there has been good leadership, but it has been a little bit fragmented. There's been the Development Program Office at times, the Urban Design Unit at times, Plans and Places at times. This brings it all under one responsible helm. Point I would like to make that at this time, COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted the city centre, and it definitely requires a much more collaborative, integrated team to build on the great progress we've made in the past leading up to now. But now we really need to double down on unlocking that vision that we have in the city centre master plan and get that delivered. So I'm at this structural change and look forward to good, strong vote of support for it. There are other speakers. I've got Councillor Watson next, please.
Okay, yes. Am I coming through okay, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you are, Councillor.
Okay, great. I've got a bit of trouble with my bandwidth too, so I'll just leave the video off if that's all right. This is about leadership and choosing the best grouping to lead how the city centre master plan might be implemented in the future. And certainly, you know, this is a key challenge at the moment. If we look at the issues that are confronting the city from in Albert Street and other places, the negative impacts of COVID-19, and I guess more than that, from an ordinary citizen's point of view, the way the city centre or experience has been perceived. You know, certainly we have concerns over how people see it as in terms of everything else. We've had this call from a range of stakeholders for a more integrated approach and a clear view of what that vision for the city centre will be over time, and more importantly, how it's going to progress. So we can understand all that. We've seen that emerging from the last few years. We're told in this item that the CCO review that took place last July, or was made public at least last July, that all the review, it might well be, in terms of just, if we look at it just through a very narrow focus in terms of this particular proposal here today. But I think if we're talking about leadership more generally, and we are that CCO review, if we refer to leadership, for instance, there's quite significant commentary there of, in the first instance, as far as bringing people along with us. They found that many of the public that they spoke to had little idea what Panuku did or who they were. My concern, and I have brought it up in the CCO review committee, is the constitution, which our CCO reviewers versus public interest consideration. It makes no specific mention of the public interest. Now, that is incredibly important if we're looking at a lead agency that's going to be delivering any number of projects, and, you know, over $500 million worth of projects in the city centre. You know, all of which to a greater or less extent is going to be driven by that public interest consideration. Now, I've attempted to tie down that constitutional criticism that was made by the reviewers, but it doesn't appear to have been any progress in terms of that. If we go further, the ability of Panuku as a particular grouping within council to I guess, manage budgets and staff numbers and just general overheads, there was some pretty pointed commentary there that I won't bother repeating, but the net result of that was in terms of that kind of overhead aspect of it, which is more important now than ever. That, you know, the commentary made in the CCO review was that Panuku should be a smaller agency pursuing its goals with more determination and urgency. So from my perspective anyway, Mr. Chair, that comment about the CCO review in terms of, you know, basically providing a consistency, criticisms that emerged in the CCO review, specifically with regards to Panuku. And as I said, I'm not going to go through them in detail here, but they are there for people to read. And, you know, there is a reasonably decision making and in terms of speed, terms of openness, terms of transparency, terms of understanding local interests. So I think if we're going to be you know, thorough in terms of that analysis of leadership, then that sort of observation from our CCO reviewers should have been included as part of this report, and some comfort should have been have been addressed or are being addressed in the interim. That hasn't happened. I guess if I look to more recent times, with respect of Panuku's involvement with a number of you know, matters, some in the city centre, others spread a little bit wider afield, then that same kind of theme of concern in those areas I've mentioned comes through. We had the investigative report into the marinas that made some fairly pointed criticisms again in terms of integrity of processes and conflicts of interest. You know, we've had the unveiling of the civic administration building, you know, a fairly key project within the city centre, and which was you know, meant to be driven in large part anyway in terms of income and protections of a heritage nature that haven't eventuated. And then more recently is still, again, you know, out in my own ward, the Wasp Hangar, where there was a clear that didn't seem to be top of mind, as with the Mount Wellington racetrack, and more recently, in my view anyway, with the Dockline tram. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if we're talking about leadership, if we're talking about the CCO review, and we're talking about, you know, dealing with the various significant challenges within the city centre, I think that the enhanced status quo, option one, was actually a better one in terms of involving the council family as a whole, and perhaps not putting that burden on Panuku when it has a number of other, you know, fairly fundamental issues to address, courtesy of the CCO recommendations, not just what I've been saying. I would just say that certainly in the past I have a degree of sympathy for Panuku. They come up, that's not really their responsibility, but I guess that doesn't detract from the fact that today we've got an item before about leadership of a very significant budget at a time of great challenge. In that respect, Mr. Chair, I think the better option to have gone with was the enhanced status quo, which is more collaborative. You saw the complementary did appear, and I think that would have been a better way to proceed. So on that basis, I'll be voting accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I will just check the bar here. I'll bring that up for the speaking order. Next is Councillor Walker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just follow on from Councillor Watson, and I just want to endorse the comments that he made around the CCO review, and I just repeat the comment that the view of that review was that Panuku should be a smaller agency. I'll repeat that, a smaller agency. Quite obviously, Panuku effectively has a sunset role because finish and its property portfolio diminishes, and that's happening quickly as we're effectively selling down those assets. The need for that agency over time in part ceases to exist. And it was also noted in terms of overhead that Panuku is one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive, of the council-controlled organisations. This whole process, which quite obviously has been underway for some time, wasn't workshopped with the councillors. One of the most significant considerations I have, and Councillor Watson alluded to it, is conflict of interest. So Panuku is, it may do it indirectly. We know it has a significant stakeholding in downtown as compared to uptown, and I would have a very real concern that those interests may not be particularly transparent, but they are a very real concern, I would suggest, to council and the public. A quick list of criteria, Mr. Chair, and this was just a quick brainstorm. Inclusiveness, lateral approach, dynamic, collaborative, responsiveness, future-proof connectivity. And I apply that, my own experience on, and I would suggest that of many in the community, is that Panuku is a rather secretive organisation. To the public, most of the information is either not available or so redacted that it's impossible to find out what's going on, and it's only been through the efforts of various people in the community that they've uncovered things that have fortuitously not happened, like disastrous, and that process in itself testifies to the conflict of interest that I've referred to earlier. So I would suggest that I haven't found Panuku to be very consultative. In fact, it's brought about conflict in a number of areas, and Panuku has been involved with. And certainly, just coming back to it, the CCO review were very critical of the lack of a community as compared to a commercial imperative on the part of Panuku. That went to culture. Equally, it goes to accountability. So my concern, Mr. Chair, is that the option of having something more in council, more in line with the Auckland Development Office, has not been adequately considered. Obviously, that particular function was somewhat gutted, and we lost Ludo Campbell-Reid and so on. My belief is that that option would be more of more collaboration and vision on the part of council than what we would see otherwise. And I'm mindful that the centre of gravity around what's required is going to shift up away from the waterfront, and I would suggest the Auckland Development Office could have a significant role to play there. I'm disappointed. Again, this hasn't been workshopped, so I would just signal that I will be voting against the option as it stands, because I think we're insufficiently informed, Mr. Chair. And if it weren't for the fact that this is such an important issue, because the centre city area is on its knees, this is a significant issue. So I think that we really deserve more discussion and a far better outline of options than what we've got here, which otherwise strikes me as very much a done deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dalton, please.
Congratulate everyone that's been working on this, and you know, when the city does well, we will all do well, and it's in the best interest for all of Auckland that we find some efficiencies and some common ground, and to have the CCOs and lead on this is a good thing, and we will find efficiencies, and not only for this project but for wider Auckland as well. So I just think this is a great way forward for us. I've been reflecting on the comments just made by the councillor of the boards, I think, with the CCO boards, and perhaps we could arrange for that to happen, because there'd be quite constructive conversations, I think. But in terms of operationally, this makes sense. There's been some collaboration between ACAB, the Mayor's Office, and many others. This hasn't just happened overnight, and I believe it has happened with the best outcomes in mind, and taking into consideration some of those points. Me, I think it's all about looking forward and how we take those lessons from what happened in the past and just do things much better and collaboratively and open as we move forward. So I look forward to the progress reports as they come up through the CCO Oversight Committee, and wish everybody well going forward, and congratulations once again. This is a good outcome. Thank you.
To the Mayor. Mayor, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to just endorse what Councillor Dalton has just said. And really, you know, I've heard a bit of criticism of Panuku, but I tell you what, every time I walk down that waterfront and through the Wynyard Quarter, I think what a fantastic transformational job Panuku has actually done in that area. When I think of what's happening, demonstrated the skills that it has as our agency responsible for regeneration of our city and town centres. That's where our skill set lies, and it makes absolute sense for Panuku to lead these agencies. Look, this paper, I heard it described as a done deal. If it were a done deal, it was only because all of the agencies that have participated in this, the council, the chief executive, and my Limited, have all collaborated together and come up with this solution as the best solution available to council. That is a unanimous and strongly felt recommendation by the parties that have participated in bringing this paper to us. The CCO committee review is relevant in the sense that what it called for was a clear lead agency, something we were lacking with a strong cross-council group. This is not going to be the work of just Eke Panuku. This is going to be a work collaboratively of all of those agencies. But in the end, for a collaborative group to work together, it's got to have strong leadership and one agency that takes responsibility for making things happen. And that's why we've got this recommendation. This recommendation is not just supported by all of our CCOs and the council parent, but it's also supported by the Auckland Central Advisory Body. And I understand, Mr. Chair, from your comments, was probably one of those that were endorsing it as well. I finally think that, you know, it makes sense. The waterfront and the city centre are contiguous areas, and it makes sense to plan over them. This is what the heart of the city is, and to have an agency responsible for and the waterfront clearly makes a lot of sense. Why are we putting Eke Panuku in charge of this? because they are the people with the skill sets about placemaking. Yes, this involves transport. Yes, it involves events. It involves all sorts of things. But the essence of the city centre is how we can make this a fantastic place to live for the increasing number of people who live there. How we can make it a fantastic place to work, place to visit for Aucklanders, for people outside of New Zealand, and for international visitors when ultimately we get those people back. And, you know, this is one of the driving economic forces of our city. A very high percentage, I think 20% of the city's GDP is generated here, and we have to have that clear focus. We have to have that strong collaboration. We have to make sure that we achieve the potential that our city centre is capable of. So I want to thank officials for their work. It's happened over many, many months, for their unanimity in making this recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for your work on this too, Mayor. There's a lot been going on in your office and your direction on this. Thank you. I'll now go to Councillor Collins, and Councillor Collins is also the Ike Panuku Liaison Councillor. Councillor Collins.
Kia ora, Chair, and my apologies for being late to the meeting. Chair, I want to speak in support of the recommendations, and just before I address the areas of support which have been covered well by, say that I hear the concerns around communication that have been consistently raised by Councillors Walker and Watson, and I understand that those concerns are very real, and I think it's important that we don't just brush that aside, that if there are concerns, that we force the issue a little bit, that if people want better communications, and that's what we all want, then let's force the issue. And I'm fortunate in that in my liaison role, Chair, I have phone call access to people like David Rankin and to the chair of Ike Panuku and Paul Majuri, and we've had some very honest conversations, and I guess in that role I'm a little bit more used to calling them now because that's part of the function, and so I welcome the very constructive criticism forcing the issue, and I think it was covered off well by Councillor Dalton, who said let's hear the updates when we get to the CCO review committee so that we can keep an eye on what's going on. So I think it's important that we remember that and that we hold that as part of the focus of our discussion, that we will be getting feed forward and feedback. I want to support the recommendations, and I note that in my report to the CCO review committee, I think that was last week, that I highlighted this collective leadership, and I've seen the city master plan. I've seen what's going on in our development of the area, and what it really needs is for us to pull together all the parts of what's going to work well for Auckland so that we can get the outcomes that we desperately want. We're challenged in COVID times, we're challenged financially, and so I see this collaborative effort as being Ike Panuku, being that kind of centrifugal force that gets all the wheels spinning here. And we should be demanding that our regeneration agency, urban regeneration agency, are at the helm of this activity. So I'm supportive of what they're going to do. I welcome the ongoing feedback and the constant communication with them, because this is a part of the city that's very dear to all of us. We want to see the central part of the city, this part of the city, the master plan, succeed and flourish. And I welcome this move to ensure that Ike Panuku will take a lead in this activity, and that they'll be able to pull people together, pull the right minds, pull the right resources, pull the right organisations together so that we get the collaboration and the leadership that's necessary. So I commend it to the committee. Again, apologies for being late to your meeting, Chair, but I'm confident that we're going to get good outcomes from Ike Panuku being the lead agency. Thank you.
I will now pass the debate to Councillor Henderson, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly, kind of looking into this item, not really quite sure how it's so controversial. My understanding is that Eke Panuku's job is basically seeing the kind of results that they've delivered in other parts of the city. I think it's really kind of a no-brainer that we give them the ball to run with, as we've done before. And so I just look forward to seeing how it's going to work out. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. I'll now go to Councillor Hill.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously very much in favour of this. Just wanted to say, yeah, it was, I think constructive criticism is fine, but some of the language earlier on would have been pretty tough for some of the staff to listen to, which I don't think was super fair. So constructive criticism is fine, but appreciate that, but that's other people's prerogative. The issue for me is this is great, as others have said. Eke Panuku have shown leadership in the areas, not just in the big transformation projects like Wynyard Quarter, but if you're thinking in my hood, in Northcote and Takapuna, they've won awards in our area. Who is the lead with mana whenua on Te Ara Awataha, the Northcote Greenway, which our community have been waiting over a decade for, and now they've been working with community groups, the local board, mana whenua and Healthy Waters on what is a magnificent project coming. Similar work Panuku is working on with the Puhunui stream, the unlock in Henderson, Onehunga, Pukekohe. So there's many examples on a small scale and a large scale which we need in the city centre. So we're going to need these projects that test our community and see how they go. We need events to back that, those skills, the project development, the market development, and the sales expertise to get commercial buy-in to some of these projects as well. So I'm excited when I think of the linear park, when I think of the precinct, or the arts precinct, I guess, through Aotea, and the city centre as well, that have been maybe neglected compared to the Albert Street and beyond. You know, there's some fantastic work, and I don't see the city centre as a mess. Yes, it's been struggling, and yes, it's been hard, especially through lockdowns where all the people have kind of left the centre, apart from the 40,000 that live there. That it's always going to be a place where people gather and come, and it's not just a transport focus, but we know that Auckland Transport already works really closely with Panuku on projects, and it's good. They will be aligned, and as someone else said, that this is not a fait accompli, but it's when all the agencies are already working from the governance perspective to trust them that this is the right way forward. So I'm excited for the future. I hope this also brings, a little more consistency and understanding. I know that when I contact someone in Northcote from Panuku, they can get across to Healthy Waters, across to Kāinga Ora, across to Auckland Transport, and opposed to me going to 4 different agencies. These projects too. So I think this is a great step forward, but I trust that we will still get the same transparency and the same engagement from all CCOs and all council departments if we need it on any issue. But I'm glad there's a lead agency and a team at our city. So thank you. You're on mute, Chris.
My apology. Say it again. Don't think there's other speakers. So that concludes the debate. All those in favour say aye.
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 Aye. To the contrary, no.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
And record that, please.
Okay. Can I just take Councillor Watson first? You're recording your vote against A and B. Okay, are there other councillors who wish their dissenting vote to be recorded?
Walker.
Councillor Walker.
Stewart.
Got Councillor Stewart, yes. Okay. And Stewart against A and B. We shall do that. Thank you. Thanks to everybody that's contributed to this report and to the outcome here today.